Mr. Bhattacharya, distinguished panelists, friends, ladies and gentlemen. It's customary to say that it's a great pleasure to be here, but I actually mean it. I think it's a very pleasurable experience for me to be able to be here and talk about this particular book. It's a superb book by a masterly author. Finance secretaries live in dread of those who write about the inner workings of the finance ministry, and ordinarily I wouldn't have come. But thankfully the inner workings that we are talking about today are at least 46 years old. So I was bold enough to show up, and from a civil servant's perspective, whatever was dangerously political 46 plus years ago is not very political today. So it's relatively safe, and civil servants like to be safe. The Reserve Bank has a 5-volume official history. The State Bank of India has an official history. The World Bank has an official history of its first 50 years. But to my knowledge, there is no official history of the finance ministry. This book is so good that I think it actually functions almost like an official history of the finance ministry through its coverage of the finance ministers between 1947 and 1977. It is, however, different from an official history in as much as it is more objective than most official histories are. This book has been written with the highest standards of fairness, objectivity, and neutrality in its treatment of its subjects. It's very carefully written, and the language is very precise, which is always pleasing for a civil servant to see, because precision in writing things is very important to us. There's no suggestio falsi anywhere, no innuendo, but at the same time, there is no suppressio veri, and there is no pulling of punches. So this combination makes it a very valuable work for both people who are in the economic present and those who are studying the economic past. For me, the most interesting learning from this book is that the issues of the modern era are not very modern. In fact, they are the old issues that all people in the finance ministry used to face. Is probably the most important learning that I received from this book. So let me mention just 3 of many such issues that struck me. First, the issue of independence of central banks. Second, the issue of whether law enforcement actions are political or not. And third, whether finance ministers should be politicians or experts. And this book casts light on all 3 of these questions from a much earlier era. So let me read you 3 short extracts on these 3 topics to give you a flavor of what you can find in this book. I've been very selective in the extracts that I've chosen. So let me start with page 117. And I'll just read out an extract. This is on central bank independence. Now, we are talking about a time when the Prime Minister was Jawaharlal Nehru, and this is about a time when the then Finance Minister was having a disagreement with the Reserve Bank. And I'll start reading here. The Finance Minister duly forwarded the resolution to Jawaharlal Nehru, who took little time to write to the RBI governor a letter indicating that he was completely on the side of the finance minister and that his government had taken the first big step in dispelling the notion of RBI's independence. And then it goes on. He took serious objection to the extraordinary manner in which the RBI governor had spoken to the directors of the central board about how the government move had undermined the central bank's autonomy. He goes on, I skip a few lines. The central government is directing, this is a quotation from the Prime Minister, the central government is directing its policy to attain certain objectives laid down in the 5-year plan. It would be completely absurd if the Reserve Bank followed a different policy because it did not agree with those objectives or with the methods of achieving them. Again, I skip a few lines. And this again, I'm quoting the Prime Minister then. You have laid stress on the autonomy of the Reserve Bank. Certainly, it is autonomous, but it is also subject to the central government's directions. Okay. I'll go on to the issue of whether law enforcement actions are political or not. So again, I read from page 71. The political significance of establishing the Commission of Inquiry against Dalmia can hardly be ignored. Dalmia was not just one of the leading industrialists of the country, but had been deeply associated with the country's political leaders before partition as well as after independence. He had relations with Mahatma Gandhi, Muhammad Ali Jinnah, and Jawaharlal Nehru. However, he was seen to be closer to Jinnah, and that proximity is believed to have strained his relations with Nehru. I skip a few lines. It is not clear if Deshmukh's, that is the finance minister's, moves on initiating the inquiry into Dalmia's business activities received any encouragement from Nehru. But that Nehru did not oppose his finance minister's action against Dalmia must have had its own unstated political resonance. I'll read one last piece, and this is about who the finance minister should be. Should it be a politician or should it be an expert, etc.? There was a clear pattern in Nehru's choice of finance ministers. The preference was for a professional expert, an economist, or a retired civil servant. And then I skip a few lines. Morarji Desai had differed with Nehru's belief that only an expert in financial matters should be considered fit to become the finance minister. Instead, the more important attribute of a finance minister, according to Desai, was that he must be a member of the Congress party. That was necessary in view of the criticality of the functions of the finance minister. Nehru became curious. He wanted to know what Desai thought were the key attributes necessary for a finance minister. Desai lost no time in listing out 4 conditions that a finance minister must fulfill. 1. The person chosen as the finance minister must enjoy the prime minister's full confidence. And just as the prime minister must be confident that the person chosen to be finance minister would be able to discharge his responsibilities competently, the finance minister should also have complete confidence in his own abilities. Okay. 2, the finance minister must be a full-fledged party man, believing in the ideals and the programs of the party and also in implementing them. 3, the entire country must have full faith in the integrity of the person chosen as the finance minister. And 4, the person chosen to be the finance minister should have the required intelligence and common sense to seek the help of experts and benefit from their advice to arrive at a proper decision and implement it. Nehru had concurred with Desai's analysis. So these are 3 extracts of what I found very, very, very resonant with current discussions on various topics. And as they say in French, plus ça change, plus c'est la même chose. I mean, the more things change, the more they are the same. So in conclusion, let me again congratulate Mr. Bhattacharya on a book that leaves me eagerly looking forward to the next volume and hoping that he will stop well before 2014. Thank you.